Chapter 6. The Trial of Shadows and the Mandate of Silverstrand. The square began to breathe again, though the air remained heavy with the scent of ash and the lingering echoes of the crowd's roar. Marcus moved with the grim, clockwork precision of a man born to the blade, his massive frame a silent sentinel as he organized the transition from public spectacle to private justice. Beside him, Lyra Stormwind moved with a calculated grace that belied the scars upon her face. She spoke to the remaining council members not with the heat of a conqueror, but with a cold, measured clarity, ensuring each understood that what followed was not a mere punishment, but a singular, final opportunity for redemption. Otnam watched from the shadows of the council chamber's entrance. Below, the citizens of Amaranthin dispersed in small, murmuring groups, their voices a low hum of debate over the first act of their chosen leader. Elena, the young girl whose innocence had so often been a mirror to Otnam's own darkness, watched with wide-eyed curiosity. Her earlier suggestion that the people must choose their own path had been validated, yet the weight of that choice now rested squarely on Otnam's shoulders. "Marcus," Otnam said, his voice a low rasp that carried through the chamber. "Guard the entrance. I will speak to them one by one. No one enters or leaves without my word." The warrior gave a curt nod, his armored form blocking the light of the doorway like a monolith. Otnam turned to the two figures already seated within. "Lyra, Dr. Blackwood, I require your presence. Your eyes see what mine might miss." Lyra took her seat to his right, her expression as impassive as the stone walls, yet her hand rested habitually near the hilt of her sword. To his left sat Dr. Blackwood, a man Otnam had only recently begun to know. The doctor was thin and spectacled, his keen eyes darting behind glass lenses, possessing an analytical sharpness that seemed to dissect the very air. The heavy oak door groaned open. The first council member was ushered in, an elder man whose bureaucratic confidence had withered into a stammering wreck. Eldrick Varin, once the proud head of city infrastructure, now looked diminished, his fine robes hanging loose on a frame bent by the weight of the city's judgment. As Eldrick approached the table, Otnam noticed a subtle shift. Dr. Blackwood leaned forward, his eyes narrowing almost imperceptibly. A flicker of something, suspicion, perhaps, or a dark recognition, passed between the doctor and the councilman. "Name and title," Otnam commanded, his voice echoing in the vaulted ceiling. "Counselor Eldrick Varin," the man responded, his voice wavering before he tried to find a shadow of his former self. I was the head of city infrastructure and emergency preparedness." Otnam's lip curled into a sardonic sliver of a smile. "Emergency preparedness? A laughable title, considering the state of the walls when the tide hit. Tell me, Doctor, do you have any insights on our guest?" Blackwood adjusted his spectacles, his tone clinically detached. "Eldrick? A competent administrator, certainly, though I found his preparedness reports to be, shall we say, consistently optimistic. Dangerously so." "Optimistic," Lyra interjected, her voice like a razor's edge. "I reviewed his protocols before the siege. They were theoretical at best, criminally negligent at worst. He had contingency plans that existed only on paper, while the blood tide was at our gates." Eldrick's face turned the color of ash. We did the best we could with limited resources." "Limited resources?" Lyra cut him off, leaning into the light. "We had intelligence about the blood tide weeks before the attack. Your department did nothing." "Why?" The silence that followed was a physical weight. Eldrick's fingers fidgeted with the edge of a document, his eyes darting toward the shadows. Otnam's preternatural insight, sharpened by the dark energies within him, saw the truth written in the man's sweat. He wasn't just afraid of the king. He was terrified of something else. "The hammer drops, Eldrick," Otnam whispered, the sound carrying a chilling finality. "You knew of the tide weeks in advance. Speak the truth, or the shadows will find it for me." Eldrick collapsed into his chair, his facade shattering completely. We knew more than we reported," he croaked. "The blood tide wasn't just an external threat. There were collaborators, Inside these very walls, the air in the room seemed to chill. Bribes? Otnam asked. Not just bribes, Eldrick moped, his quill shaking as Otnam pushed a piece of parchment toward him. Payments to look the other way, bribes to weaken the gates. I thought I could manage it. I thought I could control the situation. Names, Otnam demanded. Every one of them. Merchants, nobles, counselors. If a single name is missing, your redemption ends here. As Eldrick began to write frantically, he muttered names that sent a shiver through the room. The Gold Hand Trading Company, the Blackstone Consortium, the Ravenscroft lineage. They didn't just collaborate, Your Majesty. They orchestrated the collapse. The blood tide wasn't just an invasion, it was a calculated economic restructuring. Otnam took the list, his eyes scanning the names. Lyra, have the guards take Eldrick to a secure cell. Full rotation. He is to be guarded at all times. If he dies before I am finished with him, the guards will take his place. As Eldrick was led away, his shoulders slumped in total defeat. The door opened for the next. Magistra Cordelia Varlina stepped into the room. Unlike Eldrick, she was a pillar of steel-gray hair and defiant resolve. Her robes were impeccable, her posture rigid. She was the head of economic regulations, and her name sat prominently at the top of Eldrick's list. I assume you have questions about my tenure? She asked, her voice crisp and maddeningly calm. Enough with the diplomatic scripts, Cordelia, Otnam said, leaning forward until his face was inches from hers. I've heard the prepared speeches. I want the truth. Lyra stepped forward, her scarred face hardening. What Cordelia means by regulations is that she managed trade agreements that allowed certain merchants unprecedented access during our most vulnerable moments. She systematically weakened our economic defenses, granting licenses to those with direct ties to the tide. Accusations are not evidence, Cordelia responded smoothly, a cold smile playing on her lips. I acted within my duties. Trade is complex. Is it? Otnam signaled to a guard, who brought forward a thick stack of trade logs. Your signature is on every exemption, Cordelia. You had the city pay for its own siege while you pocketed the gold from weapon sales to the enemy. He channeled a sliver of eldritch power, letting the dark energy coalesce around her like a physical threat. For a moment, her composure wavered, but her mind was a fortress of bureaucratic indifference. The city requires steady hands, she said, her voice losing none of its steel. Not emotional outbursts. I protected what could be preserved. And failed beyond words, Otnam replied, his voice dropping to a deathly quiet tone. From this day forth, Cordelia, your worldly possessions belong to the kingdom you betrayed. You will be stripped of your fine silks, given the robes of a peasant, and escorted to the border. You are banished. Cordelia the dishonest shall be your name in the histories. She gave a single, imperceptible nod as the guards led her away. The third to enter was Theodoric Raven, Director of Maritime Commerce. He was a man consumed by a different kind of darkness. Fear. He didn't wait for the accusations. He collapsed, his voice a whisper of desperate confession. The maritime routes. They weren't trade routes, he confessed, his hands trembling. They were corridors. We engineered the pathways. We made the ports look vulnerable. We redirected the patrols. We didn't have a choice. There is always a choice, Otnam said. Not when they threaten to erase your entire lineage, Theodoric cried. The blood tide doesn't just kill. They have agents. They know everything. They erase families as if they never existed. He pushed a small, leather-bound ledger toward Otnam. This is the truth. The safe in my quarters, behind the Southern Maritime Chart. It contains the rest. The tide's true purpose isn't just land. It's something much, much worse. Otnam took the ledger, his eyes of the runekeeper flaring as he saw the hidden annotations within the margins. The secrets of Amaranthin were finally beginning to bleed. The air in the council chamber had grown thick with the weight of uncovered sins. Theodoric Raven had been led away to his quarters under heavy guard, leaving behind a ledger that whispered of a conspiracy far deeper than simple greed. Dr. Blackwood, Lyra, stay. Otnam commanded as the next figure was brought in. Helena Crav, the former head of judicial proceedings, entered with a composure that rivaled Cordelia's. But there was a different light in her eyes, a sharpness that suggested she was not just a participant in the system, but its architect. Otnam didn't wait for her to speak. He sat his chair directly in front of hers, the wood scraping harshly against the stone. He began the esoteric rite, his hands moving in a blur of arcane motion. The air became viscous, reality bending around the ritual until Helena's pupils dilated unnaturally, and her bureaucratic armor shattered like glass. "Tell me the truth," Otnam whispered, his voice vibrating with supernatural power. "What is the blood tide truly hunting?" Helena's voice emerged, fragmented and raw. "They are collectors, not of gold, not of land. They want the bloodlines, genetic markers that manifest once in 100 years. The Varen, the Blackwood, the Stormwind, and the Ravens." Lyra's hand went to her sword, her face pale. Blackwood froze, his spectacles slipping down his nose. "They want the potential," Helena gasped, fighting the compulsion of the rite. "Rare metaphysical capabilities. They would have them or see them erased from history. I wasn't collaborating, I was hiding them, redirecting investigations, creating legal corridors to keep the lineages safe from the tide's extraction." Otnam leaned back, the ritual's energy dissipating. "A selection," he murmured. "They weren't just invading a city, they were harvesting a people." He turned to Lyra. "How many primary council members remain?" 17 in total," she replied, her voice steadying. 12 primary, 5 alternates. "Bring the remaining 8 primary members here," Otnam ordered. "In chains. I will not spend the night chasing shadows. We will sort the wheat from the chaff now." Within the hour, the chamber was crowded with the remaining elite. Some were defiant, others wept, but all were bound. Otnam, with Dr. Blackwood's methodical assistance, spent hours cross-referencing Eldrick's list, Theodoric's ledger, and the judicial logs Helena had been forced to reveal. By the time the moon reached its zenith, the judgment was ready. Otnam stood before the assembly, his presence filling the room. "The corruption ends tonight. The old council is dissolved. Your lands, your titles, and your wealth are hereby stripped and seized by the crown to pay restitution to the city you allowed to burn." A heavy silence fell, broken only by the clinking of chains. Marcus Vallon, Elena Roth, Thomas Green, and Sophia Kieran, Otnam announced, pointing to the 4 whose records remained clean of the tide stain. "You are free. You will be the architects of our reconstruction, working not for yourselves, but for the people." He then turned to the 3 who had collaborated out of fear or twisted necessity. "Lucius Mayrax, Marcus Blackthorn, and Isabel Raven. You have knowledge that is dangerous but useful. You will not return to your offices. Instead, you will serve as the first instructors at a new institution, the College of Talents." He looked toward Helena Crav, who watched him from the back of the room. "Helena, you will be the head of this college. You will use your nuanced interpretations to protect these bloodlines. But this time, you will do it under my direct oversight." "And the sick?" Blackwood asked, his voice hopeful. "Dr. Blackwood," Otnam said, "you will establish a teaching hospital. Every citizen, no matter their birth, will have access to healing. You will train a new generation of healers so that Amaranthan never again has to rely on the mercy of the corrupt." Otnam turned his gaze toward the future. "We require an architect, Arya Stoneheart. Find her. I want the walls fortified with towers and gates that will never break. But more than that, I want a city worth defending. An orphanage, a school, civic housing, and aqueducts. I want industry and farming to flourish in the ash." He paced the length of the room, his voice rising. "We are establishing 6 guilds to anchor this new society. The warriors, the rangers, the mages, the healers, the adventurers, and a center for technology research. And to ensure our safety, a city guard training hall." Lyra nodded, a rare glimmer of approval in her eyes. "A comprehensive vision, Your Majesty. But such a city needs a name that does not smell of the old world's rot. Otnum looked out the window toward the silver moonlight reflecting off the harbor. Silverstrand, he declared. The kingdom of Silverstrand, with Amaranthin as its heart. Send diplomatic envoys to our neighbors. Let them know that the tide has been turned, and a new power has risen. We will begin the distribution of food and the medical inventory immediately, Helena added, her tone shifting from prisoner to administrator. Good, Otnum said, the weight of the day finally pressing upon him. I trust you all to see to it. And one more thing. Send the blood tide a bill for the damages they caused. Every vessel of theirs that enters our waters is to be seized, its value subtracted from their debt. Let them see how Silverstrand responds to thieves. As the council members were led away to their new lives or their new prisons, Otnum looked at his companions. It has been a long day. We have achieved a lot today reforming the city. He turned away from the light, seeking the quiet of the long rest he had earned. The Archon had ascended, and the world would never be the same.